workforce development, which is really apt in regard to a lot of the changes in the workforce with AI, and it's how to really foster flexibility in people's careers so they're able to move from one career to another. So perhaps Dr. Hazel, you could describe Claude Moore Opportunities and Claude Moore Foundation and then the project that you're spearheading.
Well, thank you for having me. Claude Moore Charitable Foundation has been around since 1991, and since about 2006, the main impetus was to help young people find career opportunities. The idea being that the best thing we could do for young people is to get them exposed to things they wouldn't know about and help them get that first credential or certificate so that they could get an employment when they graduate from high school. What people don't realize, I think, those of us who spend our lives in the universities, is that almost 70% of people do not have a four-year degree. I think there are 3.2 million Virginians that do not have a certificate beyond high school. And so the thought is that for those folks, if you get them started, hopefully they get with an organization that will then help them with career development and so forth. So the problem becomes then is, so Claude Moore started funding back in 2006, primarily healthcare jobs. Thinking, all right, that's an industry that's going to grow, population's getting older, fewer young people, there'll always be jobs there. So they focused on career and technical eds in high school. Yeah, but not every high school can train everybody for those types of jobs, and so you need the community colleges. So they got looking at that. So when I left Mason in 2020 to go to Claude Moore Charitable Foundation, the thought was, Bill, this is really working. This is great. We need to think about having this statewide. There should be these opportunities for kids all over the state. So I said, how many school systems are you in? 17. There are 131 school districts in Virginia. How much money did you say you had? But so we set to say, all right, what's working, what's not working, what's the evidence? And we realized some things about career opportunities. And believe me, this can tie to AI. I'll tell you how in a minute. The issue is that we realized that while focusing on that was necessary, it wasn't sufficient. First of all, and we had learned from the tech talent pathway work in Virginia that if you're not starting in middle school, you don't have the math to get into the science courses in 9th grade that lets you into the health career courses, and I'm sure that works in other science and engineering as well. So we are now competing for talent. Healthcare competes with engineering, competes with everything else early on. The next thing we realized is that the advisors, you have one advisor for 1,500 students or a handful, they don't know everything about everything. In healthcare, you know about doctors, you know about nurses, you know what was on Grey's Anatomy last week. Even though I went to medical school and didn't recognize anything. You may have had the same problem if you even know what Grey's Anatomy is in France or wherever in the world you were. But so who counsels you what courses to take so the courses you take are appropriate and meaningful to the career ahead? A big problem because these people can't know everything. There are issues with rigor of courses. Then we have this problem of the credits don't always transfer. So you've taken the course, you have the knowledge and the credits transfer, or they go to the community college or four-year school and they say, gee, you've checked the box but you don't know enough. So how do we build that? And then there's this whole issue about how do we think about stackable credentials? And I think you IT guys are farther ahead of healthcare in that because you think in terms of credentials and you can get these short-term programs and move people along. So as we thought about all of these things that needed to happen, sort of developed this idea of let's map out, life's a journey. Let's map out a few roads, highways, if you will, and some lanes in the highway, and people will change lanes, which I'm going to come to on one project that we're doing that is using AI. But the big thing I think too is that as you get earlier and earlier, we might have been able to take a 9th grader and say, we're going to teach you to be an EMT. If the rescue squad comes to the middle school, it has the ambulance and they flash the lights, the kids all going to go be EMTs or firemen, right? That doesn't really work, but they love it. But mom and dad might say, but then what? You know, so you do this for 10 years, where's your career? So we need to think in terms of setting foundations that last a lifetime. If you're going to live to be 80, and there's some of us who are already working into our 70s in this group, or close to it, some of these jobs you can't do forever, and we need younger people now that there are fewer of them. Between the drop-in births and things like that, got to do the physical work. Somebody's got to do it, unless you guys invent robots to do it all, which you're not, but that's the opportunity. So how do we rethink education so that you're doing the work, earning a living, not running up the debt, having more opportunity to complete? So, and you have to show the parents that these are out there. So thinking as careers, how do you show, well, you can start here in construction. You know, everybody starts swinging a hammer or digging ditches, but how do you show that that could lead to soils testing and supervision and management, business ownership, engineering? And then not only do we have to show that, the academic world has to empower, make that possible. So it's, and I will say, she's gone from the business school. Vijay, they've got a real interesting program now looking at that here at the business school, at Costello Business School. So, you know, what we are doing is we are thinking about how do we use AI to build these highways? You know, can you scrub the internet, find out what jobs need, what skills are needed? Can you find out what needs to be taught? Because one of the big disconnects that we found when our work was that employers would say, all right, they've been to school, but they can't do the job that we're hiring them for. So employers have to be engaged, and if they're not going to show up, how do we get the information that we need? So there are lots of opportunities there. But so thinking about career pathways, creating lanes, creating ability to switch lanes, and then the university role becomes meeting people where they are and getting them to the next step.
Thank you, Dr. Hazel. So your career from orthopedic surgeon to Secretary of Health, and now with the Claude Moore Foundation, it's almost in some ways related, but three separate careers. So
It's not a normal path.
So a question is, did you anticipate that when you were a surgeon or going to medical school? And a lot of what you read now, someone reads nowadays, is that graduates need to be prepared to have multiple careers just like you have. So what are your thoughts on your career or today's graduates?
I don't think mine was predictable. I don't know anybody coming along, who grows up and says, I'm going to be the Secretary of Health and Human Resources for Virginia. I mean, I don't think that's a job that's on anybody's radar. But somebody's going to do something like that in every state, and they're going to turn over every few years. So and that does. I actually started out. The family has a construction business. If anybody's been around here, you may have seen the red trucks. We're around. I also now am chairman of the board of that company. Which back when I was a kid, I've got math and physics. I did civil engineering in college. But then I had my first knee surgery, and I figured, actually, that's not what got me into healthcare. What got me into healthcare was I didn't want to work for my father. That just was not going to work. And so I went off on this whole different tangent. And 22 years in practice and got involved in public work and so forth. And then I had my involvement in medical policy and politics got me interested in state government, and then I was asked to be secretary. I remember I called my mom on the Sunday I was sworn in, and I said, Mom, I'm a secretary. And she said, why'd you go and do that? You're a doctor. But I did it for the first term, then I got asked for a Republican, then the Democrat asked me to stay for another 4 years, and then when I was paroled from the state, I came to Mason to do some work on thinking about designing a medical school. Dr. Cabrera wanted that, and instead he decided to build this building instead of a medical school, so probably a good decision. But But anyway, no, it wasn't predictable, JP. It wasn't predictable. And I didn't think that I would be doing this at 70.
But I thank you. And do you think for graduates today they need to anticipate possibly having multiple careers?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this revolution that you guys are fomenting now is going to change life for so many people that you have to. And, I would always, when people ask me for advice about careers, they always come to me because they want to go to medical school. So they come and say, well, what do I need to do to be a doctor? And I said, well, find something that you like to do, okay? Because you're likely to have a chance of being good at it, because you're not going to really be good at things you don't want to do. You're going to do a lot of it. Then the second is do well at whatever you do. Have a standard of competence, excellence, integrity, those types of things. And then I think we have to create, and when we look at the public funding for education and training, who here thinks our current education system in K-12 is working? Not asking you folks from far away to opine, but who thinks the American education system is working and we're getting our money's worth? No, we aren't. I mean, it's that simple.
If this was a collection of teachers,
Yeah.
would they all be raising their hands yes, or do they even have doubts?
Oh, I think they have lots of doubts. Excuse me?
I said there could be population bias.
Yeah, no, I think that they have doubts. Why do teachers burn out? Why do we have teacher shortages? But we have shortages in everything for starts, but why do we have that? Now let me ask this. Let me ask the faculty senate here. That's the real group that you get to. Faculty senate, do you think higher ed is working today? Huh? No, it's not. It really isn't. What percent of people who enter 4-year actually finish?
Here it's about 70.
Huh?
Here it's about
Here maybe about 70, but nationwide for everybody who goes in with the community college and things, it's probably closer to 20, if that, from what I've heard in data. And those people accumulate what in the process? Debt. And when they come out with the degree, does that degree match their career possibility? No. So, okay, so what can we do to help? And I'll tell you, the little project that we're working on now is started out, believe it or not, with career switchers. Medics and corpsmen in the military. The military trains 15,000 to 17,000 medics and corpsmen every year. Military's not growing, so what happens? They get out. You would think at a very steady state, 15,000 to 70,000 every year, but are they coming into healthcare? We can't find them. Why? Because these folks serving don't win the lottery. They need a job. They finish, they need a job. They may have GI benefits and things like that. Often they've used some of them. The skill bridge programs inconsistently work. I would say, for a lot of reasons. Often by the time they get out of the military, they have a family they've got to feed. They can't take 4 years to get a bachelor's degree. They need work. The problem then that you have is, so they got to have a job that allows them to earn and learn so that we can get credentials, so that they can get in healthcare. Healthcare is the most regulated segment of our economy and employment. I think law enforcement and academia rank up there as well, but there's not much you can do in healthcare that isn't defined in some sort of accreditation, regulation process, and if it doesn't get you there, it gets you on the payment side, which flows all out of CMS in some sort of a federally mandated or related payment system. So the question is, if you're an employer, let's say medic comes in and they say, I want a job, what can you do? Nothing about the language and culture of the military translates easily to the civilian healthcare. There are 49 flavors of medics and corpsmen that are taught, believe it or not, 49 flavors. They go to the 6 branches of the service and serve different lengths of time. So now we're going to come to you in academia. We're going to say, we want you to give them credit for prior learning. And what are you going to say? How do I do that? The process of crosswalking will take forever, and unless there are 20 of you that I can put into a cohort and keep for 4 years, I'm not interested. That's what we get. So what we're trying to do is develop an IT tool, an AI application, train the machines that can look at the records of these individuals and say, so they can come in and say, what can I do? And they say, well, you can do this with what you have. You can do this if you get this extra skill. And then we need to go to the academic world and say, we need people to create these bridges. So that's what we are trying to do now with IT and AI.
Talked about stacking certificates, and in terms of going in for crosswalking and meeting the needs of the employer, as opposed to just in time education rather than just in case education.
Bingo.
Does that work in the medical career?
Not yet.
And what would it take to do it?
Well, what we're doing, part of it is the regulatory and payment problem, again, because we're regulated. So for us to address the workforce issues, we have to address the regulatory environment that limits that, and that is also the payment environment in a big way. So you need to have these things go together. So the discussion I had driving down here this morning with the gentleman was, okay, well, he wants to create a new category in the civilian world called I'm not even sure what he's going to call it, but it'll be a primary care assistant, where a medical corpsman can come out and work for a physician and provide primary care services and get paid for it. Now the problem is do you create the legal framework for that, knowing that there isn't a payment pathway yet, or do you start creating the payment pathway first and then get the legal? And the answer is you got to do both simultaneously, but it's not always there in place. So we're working, in fact, probably drafting some legislation that will begin to open up those opportunities for those people right now. But so it's an interesting challenge. So if anybody's got any answers or solutions or wants to work on them, find me.
Question from, perhaps we have a comment from IEEE and how you all are thinking about these type of issues?
Yeah, James Amanian. So IEEE, when we talk to we have student branches and we talk to our young professionals, we're telling them that you're not going to only have 20 different jobs during your time, but you're going to have 5 or 6 careers, to that earlier point. So I think that's happening right now. And as well, from the IEEE perspective, we also talk about the cross collaboration, which was mentioned earlier, in terms of we need to be able to train people that can both be excellent in their fields, but also drive results or take projects from other fields. And the stacking of certifications is absolutely, most of our IEEE members are at they come through and they have 4-year degrees and then get PhDs or masters. But we're also realizing that the skills that they have atrophied in terms of, whether it's electronic engineering or computer science. So I think these are all relative on the professional side.
Thank you. Larry Metzer is going to join later. He heads policy for ACM, but a number of years ago, he had a series of projects through Sloan Foundation for professional science masters. And it was focused on this job readiness question, that the graduates of universities who aren't going to get PhDs in a STEM field and move to industry weren't ready to actually work in industry. So to what degree with your program, Dr. Hazel, are you also thinking about these types of skills such as project management and communications and teamwork?
Yeah, I think that it has to be there for some people. The jobs are different. So there are a couple things that I would share. I want to jump back. A book came out this year by a woman named Kathy Delasky, who actually is on faculty at Mason. Some of you may know Kathy, but the title of the book is Who Needs College Anymore? And I asked her at a meeting, we were on a panel, I said, why did you name it that? Because you clearly think people do. And she says, because I wanted to get their attention, basically. We have to be thinking in terms of the skills that people need. And the job is not to diminish the general thoughts about education and so forth, but degrees are increasingly irrelevant for much of the work that's being done. And this society in today's world is going to need workers at an earlier age. So I think we have to think through on these standards, accreditation, and all these things. We need to think about how people can earn and learn. That's just it. There was a gentleman from the Blue Ridge Community College who had a slide at a meeting one day, and he said that we have these problems with poverty, and we have these problems with needing social support and lack of income. He says, there's a group of people out there who will give you money week in and week out for years and enough money to live on. They're called employers. And we need to meet that basic need for food and shelter and things like that before I think we can deal with some of the others. And so the industry, the region needs to be able to say, this is what we need, and we who are thinking about the education and training need to take those things. It may be that in Northern Virginia we need a lot of project management, maybe in Southwest Virginia we need less of it. So the institutions down there may not be emphasizing it as much.
Thank you. One more question?
It's about going back to the start of your conversation about education, So do we consider AI in the cursus? If we consider AI in an educational cursus, how and when do you reshape the education to introduce AI as a tool, as a strategy, or as a discipline into the education system? Do we need to do that very early or later in higher education?
Yeah. So earlier, I think, and there's so many ways AI could be helpful in education, but probably one of the most important events in my life was 9th grade math. I went to school, and the teacher there had an experimental curriculum where we had this class of 20-some people that all went at our own pace. Really remarkable. This was, I hate to tell you back when that was like 1970. And for me, loved it. And I was able to continue moving my math along very quickly, and so I was able to double up in math and end up with a really strong math and physics background, which now I've all forgotten because I don't use it. But that lesson, imagine that you could individualize that education early on. Instead of having the idea of taking boys and girls who are 7 and 8 years old. I've got a 6-year-old grandson and a 9-year-old granddaughter and a 2-year-old granddaughter, and say, we want you to sit in class and listen all day and expect to learn. Does that really make sense? I mean, and whoever had the great idea of putting 13-year-old boys and girls in a classroom together and expecting to pay attention to a lecturer, that doesn't seem in retrospect to be such a great idea either. You have to do some of it, but I think that AI properly used gives you the opportunity to do that. And as the gentleman said earlier, let the chat box do some of this stuff. Keep score while you're doing it. Give the feedback. Get those dopamine hits that keep them going while you're doing it, and then use your time together for other things. When we were looking at having a medical school at Mason, one of the things I think that made it problematic was that the students don't go to class anymore. They can get all they need for their boards online, which means you don't need the biology and the chemistry and those things that I took at Duke, 8 to 5 every day for a year. we would sit in that lecture and get lectured for things that I never used. Now, some people did in different areas, but nobody used everything. And let's let them do that, and then let's come together as a team to solve patient problems and bring people from different areas together. It was sort of the principle we wanted to go, but you know what? That doesn't fit with the accreditation standards. So, these are things that have to be worked out.
Well, thank you, and thank you very much, Dr. Hazel. Would you like to make a closing comment?
No, I hope this is useful to you. Again, I came here, JP asked me to come, and I'm not an AI expert. But, I see possibilities and things that we can do together by making something really, really neat that works and that change the environment so that it is accepting and allows us to do more better.